The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Nick Zulovich, part of the team at Cherokee Media Group and senior editor of Auto Fin Journal and Subprime Auto Finance News. In today's webinar, Cruise Through 2019, riding the tailwinds behind the used car market in 2019, we're going to learn more from Patrick James, who is the Business Development Director for vAuto's Stockwave. But before we get started, I want to go over a few housekeeping items for today's webinar. Please make sure you've dialed in using the phone number provided in your communication email, or you're able to listen via your PC speakers. We are recording today's webinar, and we'll make a link to the recording available to you as soon as possible. You will be in listen-only mode for this webinar, but we will reserve some time after the presentation for a Q&A session. You can submit your questions at any time through the questions box on the GoToWebinar control panel. And if we aren't able to get to your question today, don't worry, because we can forward it on to the team at vAuto so they can respond back to you directly via email. And lastly, if you have any difficulty during the webinar, please click on the hand icon to alert a member of our team. So with plenty of knowledge and recommendations to share, let's get right to Patrick for our webinar. Patrick, take it away.
Well, thanks, Nick. Good day, everyone. Well, we have about 4 months under our belt here in 2019. The tax season is over, and I'm sure you've heard the debate over less than expected refunds, but we're getting more money in our check. I was always taught that not to use Uncle Sam as a savings account, yet the economists are really critical about this whole issue, in my opinion. So the economy still looks pretty strong, and I'm going to show you some numbers today that says certainly the used car market is really strong. So we're going to dig into this and give some thoughts about where our opportunities might lie as we go forward for the rest of the year. So rather than speculate, where are we so far with the used car market, and what does 4 months of used car vehicle sales tell us? So let me do my best State of the Union opener. Members of the automobile industry, the State of the Union for the used car business is strong. So if you don't have a plan to take advantage of this opportunity, shame on you at this point, because I hope after this session, you'll find some real motivation to do so. Projections are showing in this chart that we'll see nearly 3 used cars sold for every new vehicle retailed in 2019. And there's some optimists that say we could even get this number up to about 40 million, the 40 million unit mark. But what I really like as I look at the bottom of this chart is that we're on track for 39.5 million this year. And you know what? 2020 doesn't look too shabby either at 39.2 million. So it looks like we're in for a nice sustained run on the used car side of the market. And we saw a nice 3% increase over April with the numbers that just posted. Now, even Nancy is excited about the used car market, or is she just trying to mess his hair up? I'm not really sure on that one, but that's my State of the Union shtick. This next chart, we know that new vehicles have softened so far this year, and I think this chart captures the issue pretty well. And it's a little busy here, but let me point out the most critical pieces. Just look to the far left of that first bar chart. And in there, it says in 2012, you see that 7% number. That means that 7% of the vehicles being sold had an MSRP of under 20 grand, new vehicles. And 47%, if you go to the set of bar charts to the right, 47% of them had an MSRP between $20,000 and $30,000. Now, move to the right of those bar charts in 2019. Only 2% of the vehicles are under $20,000 MSRP, and only 33% have MSRPs between $20,000 and $30,000. So I think you get the picture here. We got an affordability of new vehicle kind of situation going on here. And think about it. The traditional domestic automakers have departed the new car market. The cars, they're doing nothing but crossovers, SUVs, and trucks, obviously higher price points, right? And it's interesting, I'm hearing discussions even among the domestics that are saying they have to figure out how we're going to keep these millions of loyal customers who bought cars at much lower price points that may not be able to make the leap into those new SUVs and trucks. So they're actually looking at strategies around used vehicles through certified CPO cars, etc., to be able to hold those loyal customers so they don't defect and go somewhere else that might have a new car. So kind of an interesting dilemma. So in general, the affordability issue is well laid out here. New vehicle versus used vehicle payments offer a serious affordability gap. If you look at it from 2014 to 2019, the blue bar on the new there, it's nearly 170, well, excuse me, from 2014 to 2019, it's about $100 increase in the new car payment. But look at the gap between buying a used vehicle and a new vehicle. We're looking at nearly $170 a month here in 2019, whether you get a used car payment or whether you try to afford a new car payment. So significant gap. A shout out to the host publication today. I think this article that ran just yesterday, I wanted to highlight it, really captures the situation very effectively. And I'm just going to kind of read it verbatim because I thought it was really right on point. April continued the shift in vehicle demand away from new toward used. And this is fresh numbers from April, right? The used vehicle market, on the other hand, continues to see favorable performance. Affordability concerns driven by higher vehicle prices and the interest rates have reduced the pool of people who can afford to buy new. The used vehicle market, on the other hand, continues to see a favorable performance. With attractive off-lease supply, I'm going to show you a number later that proves that, and the used vehicle market is benefiting from robust demand. In fact, supply may be more of a concern in the used vehicle market than demand. So something to consider, and if you're going to get in now. Here's some information from my parent company, Cox Automotive. We just conducted a car buyer journey study, and it says right now, nearly 2/3 of car shoppers, 64%, are now leaning toward a used vehicle when shopping, marking the third straight year that used car consideration has rose. So you can see where the momentum's coming from. Some other data, total volume, get this, not since cash for clunkers, right? That dates me a little bit. But total volume of wholesale units requiring disposal will reach a peak this year. So those clunkers aren't going to be coming in and getting traded in. They're going to go away. 16.6 million units are projected to be wholesaled this year, up from 16.4 million units last year. And so there's a lot of cars, used cars circulating in the market in the wholesale space and through auctions. And let's compare that to 2017, only 15.9 million, and back in 2016, only 15.5 million. So there is supply in the wholesale market to be had. So what is your plan for the listeners today to source the inventory you need to capitalize on this market opportunity? I just want to spend a few minutes breaking down what to expect from the key sources that feed your used car inventory this year. And obviously you can see some of the biggest pieces of the pie. The one we've already started to discuss a little bit is that trade-ins on new vehicles at almost 43%. Then we're going to dig a little deeper on the biggest upside opportunity for 2019, and that, I believe, is auction purchases. We'll walk through best practices on how to create a well-thought-out stocking strategy, and then look at how critical it is to apply metrics to evaluate the best vehicles for your strategy. And then finally, we're going to consider, where does technology fit best within the whole sourcing process? But first, we got a sidebar here a little bit and have a little fun. So let's talk about technology, how it has really revolutionized other industry sourcing efforts. Match.com alone claims responsibility for sourcing, let's call it inventory, that resulted in 10 million marriages and 1 million children born from those matches. Now, do you know what the two top search criteria are when somebody puts a profile on and they're searching for somebody. I thought this was kind of interesting. It's actually income and children. And the fact that I have several children and have no income, I consider this an oxymoron. You might feel the same way. But I thought those are interesting search words. But one online dating expert said, if you look at online dating as casting a wider net, you may meet simply a new friend, a business associate, or just maybe your dream date. But you're going to enjoy the experience a lot more if you cast a wider net and look for more opportunities. And we're going to talk about that because that's the same philosophy we have when applying technology in the auction space today. So let's just take a quick peek at how some of this dating stuff works. But this dating site technology has been around now for 20 years. And at the end of the day, they match buyers and sellers. That's really what they do, and they use technology to do it. And they have plenty of buyers, and some without a well thought out strategy. And I'll draw a parallel to this later in the auction space. But like my man John here, his profile may not have been really well thought out, as you might see here. Matter of fact, it's just downright creepy. But then there's a lot of sellers, right, out there on this Match.com. And this gal apparently hasn't finished her first date yet, and she's already creating her next profile if you kind of look deep into that photo in the background. But matching of buyers and sellers has revolutionized the dating landscape. And you have to admit, this is a great example of technology saving users a lot of time and money to meet their ultimate objective. All right, a little more on that later. So let's dig into the largest piece of the pie, that's trade-ins on new vehicles. At the end of 2018, I heard many of the dealers saying, I'm staying out of the auction. I've had plenty of trades. I got plenty of trades to feed my used car inventory. Don't need them. Prices are too high at the auction. For 2019, I have a couple concerns with that statement. And first, a trade-in is like betting on a black 10 on this roulette wheel, quite frankly. There's no guarantee that we can trade all the right cars, the fastest moving cars, cars that will turn with a respectable gross margin. We also know and have statistics like this one working against us. There are fewer deals with trades. I believe the transparency of social media has played a role in this. And folks are finding private party buyers within their network and their friend network, and we can probably expect this trend to continue a little bit. So for the 42.9% of this pie, it's shrinking. And I believe it's going to because the new car demand has been soft and for a lot of other reasons. So we have to be smart in order to stay and attack and source the cars we need for this robust used car market. So we got to make up the difference. We got to keep that used car machine growing. Well, the good news is, I was telling you about the supply earlier, and this graph shows it, is it really has improved. Many franchises are predicting all-time record levels of off-lease units coming through the auction in 2019. 3.9 million is the projection for this year, and that's a lot of cars that we're going to have access to. And you're already seeing that at auction. Now, let me address those of you on the call that, like me, my retail day, really despise navigating the auction space. So not to ignore you, I call you guys those sick puppies that are out there that can just crush, and I'm jealous, to be honest, that can go out there and just crush it at the auction. That is an art that I never acquired, and probably because I never invested the countless hours, and I really never became a student of the wholesale market like I should have. And I think there's a lot of folks in that position today where they stayed away from the auction, and now they got to get back in if they want to increase their inventory. But when I was in retail, because I didn't want to personally get involved in that, we had Larry, all right? And Larry seemed to have a lot of time on his hands, all right? I mean, who could afford to spend 3 days a week in shorts and looking for cars out there? So that was my perception of what someone goes to the auction and buys like. And I tried to replace Larry and go myself and thought, I'll go in there and I'll make it happen. But I believe it is the most intimidating process in our industry. And I applaud you that really have figured out how to master it. We're going to talk about some other best practices shortly to that end. But, you know, I didn't have the 20 years of buying experience, and I really stunk at it. But people say buying cars at auction is like Moneyball. So I wanted to share this line from Moneyball because this is the one that made the most sense to me when it said, hey, let's go to the auction and buy cars. Yeah, I'd rather get a bullet in the head or 5 to the chest and bleed to death. Those are my only 2 options. That's sincerely how I felt. So that was, you know, over 5 years ago. But now we have the disruptors. You know, those guys with the clipboard that never seem to put their hand down on the cars that you're bidding on. And this guy probably, and I know this guy did because we've worked with a few of these folks, and they've spent hours preparing for what cars they were going to bid on. And who's got time for that, right? And they spent those hours using technology in a really cozy environment sometimes. But we're jealous of what they do and the amount of cars that they're buying, and it makes us frustrated. So how do we try to compete with that is the question today. Well, first and foremost, the best dealers assemble their sales and market data and come up with the needs as a buyer before they rush out and find sellers, plain and simple. There's technology available to find vehicles that match your needs. We can do that. But I can assure you the guy with the clipboard I mentioned earlier is not buying from the gut, all right? He has what I call analysis paralysis fully in play. So they are putting together a sales and market strategy based off of data that they're pulling. And I'm going to give you a little flavor of some things where you can start to be able to pull that information together to make better decisions. So this is one of the simple worksheets that we work with dealers on just to get the thinking of how to manage the pipeline of used cars as they're coming in. So let's walk through a typical planning process here, and we'll look at a little bit of a workflow. But first, we have to determine how many cars do I need. And this is a simple worksheet. I'm more than happy to send this out to you. I share it with you after the call. I have my contact information up. But initially, what we want to do is we want to establish a target day supply. And we need to bake in a little extra time, right? Because these auction units do require transportation. So there's a lag time involved, and we have to plan for that to be able to keep the pipeline smooth. This dealer wants to sell, in this example, 50 cars and would like to end up with 60 cars on their lot at the end of the month. Why? To try to grow their business, right? They know how strong this used car market is, and it's time to ramp up. So here's the number that you, at the next line down, you'll see that line that says projected number of cars you will trade for. I've already talked about this earlier, right? This is the number you have to be honest with yourself. If you're seeing trade appraisals and trade capture start to go down because your new car business isn't driving the traffic and the trades that it used to be, and a lot of dealers are seeing this, you have to adjust for that if you're going to stay ahead of this inventory challenge. So you got to put a real number in there. You got to look at the number and the pace of the appraisals that are coming in and put something in there that you can realistically feel that you will get in a 30-day period in terms of cars that you'll actually trade in and keep and retail. So don't wing this, is my recommendation. Look in your inventory management system and see where this is trending. The data is available there. So remember earlier I showed the trend that we were seeing in vAuto and some of the larger groups. I've seen this with larger groups as well. And we just want to be very, very careful about forecasting that trade-in value. So now we've got this thing down to where we know we have to buy a few cars a day, 3 cars a day, 4 cars a day. That's how we want to be able to go into the market and buy cars, because there's nothing worse than 20 cars coming into your inventory all at once, locking up the shop, having them sit out back because it's summertime and customer pay is at its peak. We want to be able to flow these cars in a smooth basis, and to be able to do that, that's where that last worksheet really comes in handy. Now, I will tell you that I really want to emphasize that the best dealers pull data from their inventory management system to track their sales and inventory. This is a sheet that's available in some software that will actually give you pluses and minuses by segment. And this will identify the holes and the retail price bands to be able to go after. Once we identify those, then we can dig into those particular segments and try to figure out what are the best cars for your store to be able to buy. But this is the type of tracking. If you're not doing this today and you're just having the conversation with the sales desk and you're saying, hey, what do you guys need? That's what we used to do. We used to say, I don't know, Altimas have been kind of hot lately. Why don't you get some Altimas? That's not the strategy we're looking for here. We're trying to dig in by segment, by price band, and look at some market data that will actually let us know where the majority of those cars are transacting, and more importantly, where our opportunity is with the way we're turning vehicles. Here's one of my favorite reports. I was a vAuto performance manager for better than 3 years, working with dealers across the country, looking at their inventory on a daily basis and offering suggestions and best practices. And this particular report, and a little bit of an eye chart, I'll blow it up here in the second slide, but we would go back and we would pull by segment the last 6 months of sales, and we would rank those sales. All right, we would have key information in there like age and price and what we own the car for. But most importantly, we would rank those sales by markup, by what we made on those vehicles when we sold them. And the cars that came to the top, we would just do a simple analysis. Does this surprise me that, you know, one of my top grossing cars was a 2008 Hummer? Now, everybody remembers that car if we actually made an 11-pounder on it, right? But let's go deeper into the list and look at the Chevy Tahoe or the Ford Expedition or, you know, some of these other vehicles where we made a nice, fair profit on them. We sold them quickly. We look at the age column, and we know that we turned them pretty quickly and made a good margin. This is where we can get some of that list of vehicles that we need to go after and buy in the auction space. And then just as important, we would look at the bottom of this list. What were the cars that we got stuck with and we took a beating on, right? Let's not make the same mistakes. So this is a great view. It's an easy report to pull. If you're a vAuto client, your performance manager can pull it, simple spreadsheet, and you can have a nice analysis and get a little bit of a feel based on your sales to build that strategy to be able to go to the auction and buy cars. Now, once we have a clear strategy and we get a feel for the cars that we need, what the bread and butter cars are, etc., that we know work for our market, we want to proceed with caution, because I am concerned, as I was very conservative in the auction space. Again, I am concerned about those who stayed out of the auction last year because prices were too high and they were able to rely on trades. Coming back into the auction can be daunting. All right, so I'm going to give you some suggestions. And this is like going back to the basics here. But even if you're an expert buyer and you're on this call, I still believe if you haven't freshened up on some of the metrics that I think I found in working with hundreds of dealers across the country that they really focus on to make the best acquisition decisions, let's just review them and make sure we understand them thoroughly. So if you think about it, you know, you got to look and play like an investor. You know, you're like looking at a stock, right? They apply proven metrics to be able to make those decisions. Here are some of them, right? Price to earnings ratio, price to book ratio, debt to equity, free cash flow. So when they're looking at a stock, all of this is very important. And if you think about it, the average dealer is investing about $250,000 a month in supplemental used car inventory and going to auction. So I think if you thought about that as being your own money and you were an investor of your own cash and you dipped into your retirement savings to do some day trading, I'm going to bet you would school up on these PE ratios and debt to equity metrics and the like. So again, that's why I want to take a few moments and making sure that we're using solid metrics on these vehicles. So like a promising stock, we want to find the cars that were at the wrong dealer, in the wrong market, at the wrong time, but they make sense for your market. And the best dealers use these key metrics to make that decision and take the emotion out of it. So what are these key metrics? And we're going to break each one down. First one is adjusted for odometer market average price. There may be a different version of this depending on the inventory management system you use, but it essentially is giving you live market data. Why would you ever buy a car or acquire a car if you didn't know what you're going to sell it for? The Manheim Market Report you know, this is staple stuff here, right? MMR. And we'll talk a little bit about when that makes sense and when it doesn't. We're going to talk about market day supply, like buying, preferably down to the trim level, because I see your make and model market day supply numbers can be hugely different when you go in and look at trim levels. The cheaper trim levels may be on fire, the expensive trim levels may be dead in the market, and you got to differentiate that. And then finally, we're going to look at the Auto Trader Scarcity Index. And you don't have to be an Auto Trader dealer to get your hands on this information. But I've seen some buyers using this data in tandem, and I'll show you this in a minute, and really making some really sharp decisions. So first of all, adjusted market average price. Live market data, I want to know what this car is going for on average on the internet. That's simple, but it's got to be adjusted for odometer, okay? So this particular car, its market average price is 17.7 by the big blue arrow there. But if I were to price this car with only 10,000 miles on it at market average, I'd be pricing it at $19,000, okay? So key to know that in retail, because in the used car market, every car's got a different odometer, and I want to make sure I'm factoring that in. So a key metric to keep an eye on. So that's kind of our retail target, right? And then secondly, we can go to MMR. Now, MMR is, you know, I've got historically, I've preached to be careful using MMR on trade-ins, unless you know you're going to wholesale the unit, right? So I'm almost afraid to throw out MMR, but you do have to get an idea of what the vehicle you're evaluating at auction should go for. And remember, we're not appraising a trade-in, we're appraising a car to buy at auction. But the key here is you got to dig into the transaction data when necessary. You got to make sure that you consider how a 16,000 mile, like the vehicle on the one on the screen, would transact with an average odometer of 54 wholesale units that equal 29,000 miles, right? So I can click in and find that transaction data. And here's another thing to remember with transactions in MMR. I've looked at cars, and I'm sure you have as well, where you click on the transaction data and there's like 6 cars. So you're going to go with an average, an MMR average number based on 6 vehicles, and those odometers could vary from 110,000 to 10,000 miles. So be very, very careful, but we do want to come up and identify what we think we can buy the car for. We've set what we think we can retail it for. Now we have our margin, right? And what do we have to take out of that? Simply all the costs that we need to be able to acquire the vehicle, reconditioning, etc. The next index, and believe me, I'm not giving you all the great indexes. There's plenty more to look at, but these are some of the key ones that I see successful. You don't have to be an Auto Trader client to get this information today, but the Scarcity Index looks at the number of hits online that a vehicle is getting relative to the number that are available in your market area. So if you look at this math here, and I'm more than happy, we'll be sharing this afterwards. We don't have to get too deep in the weeds here, but generally speaking, a high scarcity index means based on online activity that is typically an attractive car in the market to acquire. And this is broken down for your market by DMA, as they say. So the scarcity can really identify some kind of hidden gems that are out there that you can probably make some nice grosses on, and few people may be looking for. And I say few dealers are looking for. Customers are definitely looking for them. The last one is the market day supply. And I get the honor of teaching, guest lecturing up at Northwood University in Midland. And what an awesome place. I can't say enough. The students up there are amazing. If you're looking for an intern, reach out to Professor L.G. Bright. Reach out to me and I'll connect you with him, but I can't say enough about their program. But this metric, market day supply, I teach about specifically up with those students. And market day supply is basically a measurement of the current available market day supply, and it looks at the average daily retail rate over the past 45 days. So we're really looking for kind of speed here, right? How quickly is a vehicle coming onto the internet and coming off the internet? So a high day supply, you typically have to price aggressively to the market. And it really indicates that a vehicle is selling kind of slowly. In most cases, a high day supply also means there's a lot of similar vehicles in the market like it. So there's a lot of price pressure on a high market day supply vehicle. A low market day supply car, you can pretty much price at or maybe even over market. And it really indicates an opportunity to price that vehicle like a hot vehicle. And what I want to break down for you on that particular slide is there's a lot of misconceptions about market day supply out there. In vAuto, the way we measure market day supply, the average is about 70 or 80 days for vehicles that are on the internet. So that gives you kind of a benchmark. When you see cars moving faster than that or cars moving slower than that, it gives you that sense. And at acquisition, when you're making quick decisions, market day supply can be a huge one. I think this lays it out best. One of our colleagues actually built this calculator. And if you look over to the left to the blue arrows, you can pop in the number of units you're looking at in your competitive set in the market and the number of like-mind market day supply. This car has 185 market day supply. Over to the right, it actually puts it what I consider in layman's terms, right? That means there are 54 dealers chasing 13 buyers with a car like that market day supply. It really hit it home for me. And then we take another example. This is a 54 units again, but it's a 38 market day supply. That means there are 54 dealers chasing 64 customers, okay? Really brings it home in terms of which car is going to have the price pressure, right? It's that one that I showed you before this slide that really we have to be careful. And that's what we want to know at acquisition, if we can find those good market day supply cars. Now here's the 1-2 punch. I told you about some of our best buyers and what they do. They combine the scarcity index and market day supply. They look for high scarcity vehicles. Look at this vehicle, 2015 Audi S4, 1,630 scarcity index, really super high number. And then it's got a 38 market day supply, like my market day supply. That's a home run vehicle, right? And this is a great little technique for you to use when you're looking for cars at auction to fill those gaps. All right, so technology. If you were thinking that we spent all that time and energy on, what cars to buy, wouldn't it be great if technology could match me as a buyer with sellers and the cars I need? And that technology is available today. Think about it this way. What you really need to do to be effective, to find that wrong car at the wrong place, the wrong dealer, at the wrong time, et cetera, you got to cast a wider net. And I talked about that really with the Match.com comments, right? So look at it this way. This is a appraisal, what we call look-to-book report within a dealer's inventory management system. The top one says that they've captured 38 trades, 40% trade capture rate. All right, now keep in mind they looked at 93 appraisals to get those 38 trades. The dealer on the bottom looked at 228 trade appraisals to get 69 trade-ins. Now, I would argue that the guy on the bottom has a 30% capture rate. The guy on the top has a 40% capture rate. I'd rather be that guy on the top, right? He's doing a better job of converting appraisals to trades. But at the end of the day, if I could be the dealer that gets 69 trades instead of 38 trades, that's taking a lot of pressure off of me going to the auction. And we know the same concept applies when you go to auction. If I can look at more cars and I can apply these metrics to more vehicles, then I can win more cars at auction and find those opportunities to be able to buy. And if I do that more diligently and more thoroughly than other guys in the wholesale space, I win. So how many cars do you buy on simulcast a month? I want to tell you a quick story about this because this just happened to me this week and it really opened my eyes. So clearly you would agree that simulcast saves you a ton of time, right? You're not Larry anymore, spending 3 days buying and laying. But if you've been to an auction lately, I was just at one this week and saw the pilot version of the virtual lane, right? no cars running in the lane. All right, only on the monitor, live auctioneer at the stand, video screens up, cocktail tables sitting where the cars would normally run. And you can go there if you still choose to go and kick the tires on the car out in the lot like you do in your pre-sale activities, you can do that. But when it comes time to actually participate in the auction, you go in, have a seat, and you watch the screen above, which you could maybe do from your office, and you actually watch the auctioneer just like you would a simulcast. Kind of mind-blowing, but just don't be surprised if you see a lot more of this coming very, very soon in the coming months. All right? Consider this, like all industries, safety is first. And sometimes safety efforts will drive change, whether you're really ready for it or not. And I think this is going to be an interesting impact on our industry, and it's going to force technology even faster. Why would I be worried about using simulcast? Well, guess what? We've had some upgrades, right? We don't have these systems anymore. We don't have dial-up modems and analog. So we're able to use technology like this where we can actually set up lane monitors that alert you when the car you're looking for is running. You can have lanes open on your computer as you are doing multitasking, doing other things at the dealership, and they can shout at you and let you know that, hey, the vehicle you've been looking for, or perhaps you put a lane alert in there that said, I'm looking for a 2015 to 2017 Camrys today, and I only want them with a 4+ CR score, and I want to know if any of them start going for less than 500 below MMR. Give me an alert. And that could actually alert you on your computer while you're busy doing other things and cars are actually coming down the lane. So there's a lot of technology to be able to help you master this that doesn't require the 20 years of history and being a wholesale student. So the keys to driving better sourcing is this. I really hope you took away a few nuggets today, because the State of the Union for the used car market is really expected to be strong this year, and it's going to get better. And the winners will be able to source the inventory necessary to keep pace when the trades at the curb are falling behind. You'll have to find a way to efficiently match your plan with the sellers that have the cars you can make money on. Take the opportunity to get ahead of the summer market, leverage the technology to cast a wider net, and then apply those metrics, okay? And apply those metrics to be able to make smart decisions and buy cars like an investor, all right, not a speculator. Or as a buyer, you can have a bad strategy, and that could lead to attracting wrong sellers, like this particular one on Match.com. I love this one. Had to be a great joke, but another very, very creepy one, an actual profile. I'm a fun-loving guy, self-starter who has absolutely no interest in committing murder. Anyways, so a little fun with that. This is my contact information. I want to take a moment to ask some questions, and particularly if you're using other metrics out there that are working really well from you, I'd love to hear about them. Whether you do it in the Q&A session here or whether you send them to me, I've got my email and information on there. I'm always loving to pick up tips from folks out there that are doing a great job, or those that are finding success. And, you know, I'm a pirate. That's why I got the pirate cap on, because I just steal your ideas and spread them to everybody else. But I won't spread them to a guy across the street, all right? I'll do it broadly. All right, I'm going to open it up for Q&A, Nick.
Excellent presentation, Patrick. A lot of great information and a lot of smile-worthy stuff sprinkled in there as well. And again, if you're interested in reaching out to Patrick James, who is the Director of Business Development at vAuto Stockwave, his contact information is there on the screen. And we are recording today's webinar, so please keep watch of your inbox for a link to today's presentation so you could revisit the great information that's been shared and distribute it around your store. And Patrick, just to take off on some of the topics that you had mentioned, either in your own interactions with dealers on your travels or discussions with your colleagues who are out in the field, just what kind of shape are trade-ins that dealers are seeing nowadays? That you referenced the volume is going down, but how rough or how nice are these potential trade-ins that the dealers are seeing nowadays? Any insights or anecdotes you can share there?
Well, we know people are keeping cars longer, but I will say this: I've had some discussion with some folks lately about, well, everybody wants that, 4, 5, 6, 7-year-old car, right? And that's money, right? And that's the car you can sell in that really affordable price point, whether to a subprime customer or be able to find that $8,000 to $13,000 vehicles like gold. Well, the problem at auction is there's a lot of dealers have wised up and said, you know what, I don't think I'm going to wholesale this stuff anymore. I'm going to actually hang on to this stuff in retail, which is really a wise decision. And I've worked with a lot of dealers where we put that strategy in place, and it's been a huge success for them. So it used to be kind of an attitude where that car's a little edgy, I don't want to get any on me, and we might have customer issues. And now they're doing a much more thorough job of making sure, that they go through the car and really explain to the customer what they're getting into and being fully transparent, which I think is great. But then it also gives them the opportunity to be able to sell that car rather than just, pushing it off somewhere else. So I think that's a lot of the reason, that even though there may be some edgier, older cars coming in, dealers are finding a great market for those. And you don't see those floating around the wholesale space like you did. When I looked at volume opportunities, you really saw those off-lease cars, right? Because back 3 years ago, all the OEMs jumped in heavy into leasing because the new car business was thriving, and now we're starting to see that volume come back into the auction space. And so, yeah, I would agree. Those are more cars that you probably put your certified strategy behind. But there are still cars that get traded in, and they may be late model stuff, but they get traded in at the wrong market, at the wrong dealer, at the wrong time. And if you're out there casting a wider net and looking across auction platforms, and I'm not talking about just Manheim, just ADESA, Edge Pipeline. If you're using technology to look across all of those platforms and search for the right cars, there are guys that are winning some really good vehicles. And it's nothing for a guy to say, it's nothing for him to buy a car 1,000 miles away now. I mean, if the money works and the reconditioning works and the transportation factors in, if that's what I got to do, then I'm going to move that car to me, because quite honestly, that market 1,000 miles away may not support that car very well. In my market, that thing's a rocket ship, so I'm going to take it.
The voice you're hearing, that's Patrick James, who is the Business Development Director at vAuto's Stockwave. He's our special guest expert for today's webinar. Cruise through 2019, riding the tailwinds behind the used car market. And you referenced in your last remarks this dealer's question, but if could, any suggestions as far as how dealers can monitor the mobile auction space, such as Manheim Express? Keeping tabs on brick and mortar auctions is one thing, but any recommendations on how they can also keep tabs when a mobile sale might come around to find those gems as well?
Yeah, so Manheim Express is an example. Obviously, I represent the technology called Stockwave, which really provides that cross-platform search. We consider ourselves agnostic. we don't care if the car's at ADESA. Obviously you'd say, oh well, Cox Automotive, that's Manheim, right? But we don't care if the car's at ADESA, if it's at an Edge Pipeline auction. Doesn't matter to us. We provide, and a Manheim Express car, obviously we have access to as well. We are in conversations right now because of the explosion of the ACV auctions and places like that. We are in conversations to get access to that inventory right now, and I think you'll see that coming soon, to be able to have that within our technology, because our attitude is we represent the dealer, and the dealer is our client. We want to give them as much inventory as possible to comb through, to cast that wider net, and to be able to find those cars. So that is moving quickly, and we're using our technology to get more of our dealer clients that access.
Again, the voice you're hearing, that's Patrick James, who is the Business Development Director for vAuto Stockwave, and he's our special guest for today's webinar, cruising through 2019, riding the tailwinds behind the used car markets. And another dealer is asking Patrick that he's trying to keep, along with watching the auction space, is trying to keep tabs on consumers, private sellers who might be putting their car up for sale on some of these sourcing sites that have come up, or Craigslist, or wherever that they might be able to advertise, so to speak. What have you heard from dealers as far as suggestions or strategies to keep watch of that potential source, or any recommendations there to find those gems that might turn for nice growth?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's really big topic, because it was normally an area where, someone might dip a toe in the water and go, oh wow, this is a pain in the rear end to go try to find these cars on Craigslist, and how do I identify them, and how do I deal with all of that? It's amazing the resurgence that is happening for, because I showed you earlier that social media may be stealing our trades, right? So how do we go into social media or go into Craigslist and find those cars as a dealer and try to make offers on those vehicles? And there are dealers that are very successful. There's actually, I've seen some lead source providers now that have actually come up with ways to be able to communicate with folks on Craigslist, where you can make them an offer and get the car. But here's the thing I really is so important. The dealers that I have worked with that have been successful in trying to buy private party vehicles, or quite frankly, even trying to buy cars in their service lane, is they're very disciplined in not connecting another transaction with it. I know that seems like a simple thing, but it's amazing how the consumer, and I've seen this proved over and over and over, who's had success and who hasn't, where the consumer puts the brakes on the minute that you start talking about, well, sure, I'd love to buy your car. However, I got to get you into another vehicle, because, as dealers, we're sellers, right? That's how we got to be this good, because we can sell icicles to Eskimos, as they say, right? So that's our strength, and we want to move them into that other vehicle, because what are you going to do without that one? But those that are very disciplined was saying, listen, Mr. Customer, no strings attached. This is a sourcing strategy. This is how, like, we go to auction and buy cars. We don't buy a car at auction thinking that, we're going to turn the car into another deal. It's to get a car for our inventory and make a car deal out of it. Same way with the customer. We just want to buy your car. You're just an auction, Mr. and Ms. Customer, and we want that car. We're going to give you a fair price, and we'll buy it from you. When they do that, that's what I find is the best strategy. Likewise, for the way they approach it in their service lanes as well. And I know there's a lot of equity strategies, and hey, you've got equity, trade into another vehicle, and I think those work fine. But when you're talking about, giving the customer an opportunity to sell you their car, I mean, let's see how CarMax has turned this into quite a weapon. That's the key to that, and that would be my recommendation if you're going to go down that road. And a lot of dealers are very successful with that, creating buying centers and all that.
Again, closing moments here with Patrick James, who is the Business Development Director for vAuto Stockwave. And just a reminder, we are recording today's webinar, so please keep watch of your inbox for a message containing a link to the recording, so you can revisit the great information that's been shared, as well as distributed around your store, so your management team can come to a head of how to proceed. And perhaps as a way to round us out today, Patrick, if considering all the recommendations that you've shared, and maybe a store is deciding to expand a little bit, to go from maybe 50 used cars in inventory up to 75, or 75 up to 100, or maybe expanding the days supply up a little bit from 30, or what have you, what elements should they have in place to make any type of growth expansion stemming from the information that you shared? What are maybe some infrastructure or other processes in place that, if they do decide to make some changes, that they're prudent ones?
Yeah, I think that the key to be able to make that growth. So we shared earlier that we looked at their sales, right? We looked at vehicles that they sold that were high grossers, and these are vehicles that they do well with. Well, when you look at your business by segment and by price band, like I showed that chart up earlier, you were going to find, I think, for someone who's really looking to grow, you're going to find that you don't have any sales history in some of these segments. You may not have sold a sports car between $10,000 and $15,000 in the last 6 months. So that's where I think the real opportunity is. If you want to go to auction and try some vehicles that would fit in that segment. Now, first, I want to look at the registration data for that segment. And we package that up really nicely in our provisioning module within vAuto. And we give you that market data so you can kind of show exactly what's going on in the used car market around you. I'm sure there are other software providers that have some of that data as well for you. But the key is spending some time studying which cars that you feel will do well. There's great technology out there in terms of creating safe searches and combing auctions. I'll put my plug in again for Stockwave to be able to find the cars. But I think the most important thing is sitting down and really having a deep conversation, looking at sales and market data, mostly market data in this case, right? Because you may not have the sales rate in any of these segments, and coming up with a plan to be able to go out and say, hey, we're going to try a couple of Subaru BRZs, right? Because they have a really high scarcity and a low market day supply. Maybe we can go carve out a little opportunity in this sports car price band that the registration data says it's doing really, really well, but I don't get any of those traded in, and I never bought any at auction. That's a great opportunity. If you go through all those segments, I think you can find that growth opportunity and do it wisely and calculate it as you go.
Great way to end it. That's Patrick James, who is the Business Development Director for vAuto Stockwave, and his contact information is there on the screen, both phone number and email address. Patrick, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and recommendation.
Thanks, Nick.
And if you haven't already, please be sure to go to our website at autoremarketing.com to subscribe to all of our offerings to stay up to date on the used car industry. For all of us at Cherokee Media Group, I'm Nick Zulovich. We thank you for joining us, and we look forward to having you again next time.